Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. We are joined with transfer expert and journalist Ben Jacobs, and we are going to be talking we're going to be talking all things Manchester United, looking ahead to the managerial appointment in the summer. Who is likely to be the full-time manager for Manchester United, with Thomas Tuchel seemingly out of the race as of today? We're going to get more explanation on that from Ben. We're going to be talking about Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments that have caused a huge shockwave across the world, really, you would say, after his comments that were revealed yesterday, which a lot of people have many different opinions on. We're going to get Ben Jacobs' say on that as well. And we're going to be talking about the future of some of the players at Manchester United. Bruno Fernandes, looking at summer transfer targets like Carlos Baleba. We're going to be getting into all things Manchester United, so stay tuned, get your questions in, get your super chats in, and let's get into it. I mean, first and foremost, Ben, how are you doing?
Everything is good. How are you? I've actually got some sleep now that the winter window is shut.
Yes, you've actually got some sleep. I am good, but it is never a dull day in Manchester United. I actually decided to turn my phone off last night, get an early night, put a film on. I went onto Twitter this morning and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I?
What film did you watch?
I watched Begonia, actually. It's a new film. It's interesting. I mean, if anyone's watched it, you'll understand it's very, very weird. Emma Stone's in it.
No spoilers.
Watch it. I recommend it. It's really, really good. But yeah, that film was weird and it threw me off. But it wasn't as weird as what I woke up to, because these comments from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, they have caused such a shockwave across the Manchester United fan base, across the world. And, within these comments, he's cited statistics that are 2 decades out of date. He give a political opinion, a strong political opinion, when talking about the subject of Manchester United. And whether you think his opinion is right or wrong, to talk about Manchester United in this way, it's really caused a massive stir. I mean, how is this being perceived in Manchester United, Ben? And just, I mean, from your point of view as a journalist, how is this come across and how is it going to be handled?
Yeah, I mean, as journalists, we have to stick to the facts. Jim Ratcliffe has made comments that were widely condemned, and my personal view is rightly so. And then he's issued a subsequent statement saying that he apologises if anybody took his comments in the wrong light. Manchester United, I'm told, were largely blindsided by the entire thing. But it shows you, when you have somebody as rich and as powerful as Jim Ratcliffe, that has got lots of different influences in different sectors, and you add that to a club like Manchester United, which naturally extends and transcends beyond just football as a club and a brand, everything that comes out of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's mouth is going to be scrutinised, and this can have a direct impact on the football club, even if he was not talking about a football topic, or even if Manchester United were not aware or in control of what he ultimately said. And as a consequence, these comments are going to be pulled back, regardless of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's clarification and new statement and apology, into a football realm, because the Football Association are going to look at these controversial remarks, and rightly so, because under Football Association rules, E3.1 in particular, for those of you that want to get geeky and look them up, general conduct within sport and owners falls under the FA's remit, even if an owner says something that is not related to the football club or is not in a capacity of speaking for their football club. And because Sir Jim Ratcliffe is inherently a political person, and many of his business interests intersect with the British economy, the global economy, and ultimately government officials, it's created a storm. And as I say, my personal opinion is rightly so. As an individual of influence, as somebody that intersects their business interests with government, and as the owner of Manchester United Football Club, you can't say what Sir Jim Ratcliffe said publicly in that capacity. And anybody listening that takes on board those comments and has a different opinion naturally is entitled to do so. But the fact that Jim Ratcliffe has come out with a clarification statement shows you that he feels he has made a mistake. And now we have to wait and see whether, as far as the FA are concerned, there are formal consequences for that mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of them. We've just got to wait and see how it plays out. From my personal point of view, I don't like to bring politics into football. Football for me is something that brings us all together, so politics is not something that I like to speak on when it comes to talking about football. But for Sir Jim Ratcliffe, like you say, is somebody who is in the position that he's in and is a co-owner of Manchester United Football Club, one of the biggest football clubs in the world, what you say is going to carry a lot of weight, and there's going to be a lot of people listening to that, and there's a hugely diverse fan base when it comes to Manchester United, and we'll just have to wait and see how everything plays out. But it's going to influence multiple different things behind the scenes at the club, within the hierarchy at the club, the regeneration project with senior figures involved in that. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe is landing himself in some very hot water.
Yeah, I think so. And I would just add to that briefly that, as you rightly said in your question, several of the statistics mentioned were wrong, which means that having a debate over any political topic is one thing, and freedom of speech, and no doubt in the chat there'll be lots of polarized views on many topics, but you've got to do your research in any topic, which is what we try to do as journalists, and get your facts right. And personally, I found the comments incredibly offensive. I studied Old English at university, and part of that was to look at the very roots of the United Kingdom, which are diverse, and factor in lots of different languages and races, from Dutch and German all the way through to Latin. And then you look at the modern day, and to sweepingly make comments about anybody is entirely wrong. And anybody in the UK that is here and legal is ultimately trying to contribute towards the community, and sport is great in that respect because it can unify people. And one of the biggest pet peeves that I have is when people use these terms glibly, like immigrants or refugees, even politicians, if we're being less contentious, because every politician is different. Every refugee has got a backstory, and the vast majority of them are victims, not threats. And with immigrants, each backstory basically is so diverse and different. Some people naturally come over and are first generation, others are born in the UK and a second generation, and everyone's culture and identity is, as a starting point anyway, growing up for them to define. And of course, if it's Manchester and you've grown up supporting Manchester United and you're from different backgrounds, religions, races, you've got the opportunity to go to a Manchester United game, men or women, and say this is something where we have common ground. So bringing it back to Jim Ratcliffe, the whole point, for example, of the regeneration project is about giving something new to the community right now, that through sport and through social activities can unite and modernize and ultimately be positive to everybody within Manchester, even, dare I say, the blue half of Manchester. So to then have an owner come out, whether you agree or disagree with anything he says, and that's a completely different debate, and be factually inaccurate, be controversial, be contentious, and in my view, just be plain wrong. But that is just my view. And again, the whole point is things can be debated. And then to have to turn around in the days that follow and track back and apologise, it puts both Ratcliffe and, by extension, Manchester United in a very difficult and, some would say, embarrassing position.
Yes, it is. I mean, like you said, even using statistics that are wrong, that automatically creates quite an embarrassing situation for Sir Jim Ratcliffe. But I mean, I would like him to focus on getting Manchester United winning football games consistently, being successful within the Premier League, being successful within the Champions League. And to me, that starts with getting the right manager in the place in the summer. So moving on to that, Ben, and I think you spoke really well there, but moving on to that, Thomas Tuchel, today it is going to be announced that he's extending with England. Does that rule him out of the Manchester United permanent manager job?
Yeah, barring any surprises, obviously, if England go to the next World Cup, don't win a game, lose them each 10-0, and therefore underperform, like any manager, new contracts are not so binding that there can't be surprises. But it's obvious that within the last year or so, the English FA and Thomas Tuchel have been very happy together, and now they want him to be their manager, and so does Thomas Tuchel for the 2028 Euros, which of course are on home soil. So that's very significant. And from Tuchel's point of view, he wouldn't have signed this deal if secretly he knew that he had a gig lined up. So the FA have been very smart in many ways, because they've preempted the fact that come summer, Tuchel, if he was to head into free agency, would have been in demand. And they've preempted, as importantly, the fact that even if they left this until March, April, May, the danger is you're negotiating with an England manager when other clubs are doing the same, and it kind of overshadows the World Cup a little bit. And maybe heading into that World Cup, as England try and have full focus on winning a first men's World Cup since 1966, people are asking Tuchel, are you going to join Manchester United? So the FA have basically jumped ahead of the market here, and it is expected, if all goes according to plan, that Tuchel stays on, of course, because it's official that he's signed that new deal through until the end of the Euros in 2028. And Manchester United will be aware of that. And given Manchester United need to now get going with their process, whether that's in backing Michael Carrick or bringing someone in for the summer, Tuchel is not expected to be somebody that they speak to anymore in the coming weeks, because he is effectively off the market.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to touch a little bit on that, because I thought Thomas Tuchel, just from the news, and I mean, I spoke on my show yesterday, and I've been doing a lot of these Manchester United news shows over the years. So when you follow stories, you can sort of tell what has substance and what maybe doesn't. And I really did think Thomas Tuchel was the leading candidate for the Manchester United job. He wasn't my preferred candidate. He really wasn't. I think, you know, what he's done with England so far is looking good. Let's see how he delivers in the World Cup. And, you know, you can't argue with his CV, but to me, he just wasn't the right fit to be the next Manchester United manager for multiple different factors that I spoke about on previous shows. But I genuinely believed he was probably top of that list for INEOS. I mean, was that the information you had? And then when INEOS are looking at best-in-class managers, I mean, what other managers out there fit that best-in-class bill that they're also looking at?
Yeah, I think Thomas Tuchel was a name that was in Manchester United's thinking both before Ruben Amorim and after. But as we've said on previous shows, after deciding to appoint Michael Carrick, the process was only just beginning. So we haven't had a scenario where Manchester United, as of now, have made any active, formal outreach in terms of interviewing any name. It's an internal process. Phase 1 is running the data. Phase 2 is leaving it a bit of time to also understand whether Michael Carrick is going to be in this process, or whether they're going to run the process whilst Carrick tries to steady the ship and qualify for Champions League football. And then as we get into potentially late February, because you've got a little bit of a break where you might be able to reach out to certain people, but certainly by the middle of March, they want to be in a position where they're turning internal discussions into external ones. So like I said before, the FA have just got ahead of everything by saying, we think Thomas Tuchel could be a flight risk if somebody offers him a domestic job in the Premier League, and that's before we secure his signature. So we're going to put faith in him and have him stay on through the Euros in 2028. So Manchester United effectively were never in the race for Thomas Tuchel, at least externally. But yes, internally, of course, he was one of the candidates that has come up in conversations. In addition to that, you've got Roberto De Zerbi. And as we broke exclusively on this show only last week, he was always going to leave Marseille. The only surprise was that De Zerbi actually resigned, and that was January. And Marseille said, no, we want to keep you. And De Zerbi said, okay. And then heading into February, it looked like De Zerbi had basically resigned himself to seeing out the season, and then hopefully, in his eyes, returning to the Premier League in the summer. Then they go and lose Marseille 5-0 to PSG, and it all blows up again. And I think De Zerbi went back to his original position of, I told you I wanted to leave in January. I've told you I'm going to leave in the summer. So let's just part ways mutually now. And he's a free agent, and he's in Manchester United's thinking as well. But they would have to convince him that he's the right fit for their model, or change their model a little bit, because Roberto De Zerbi, much more so than Thomas Tuchel, wants a significant say in the world of recruitment. You've got other managers like Maurizio Pochettino, who's being linked, of course, with a return to Tottenham as well. Julian Nagelsmann. I'm not so sure at the moment that there's much developing with Oliver Glasner, but he plus Marco Silva and Andoni Iraola are, of course, potentially available and at limited cost during the summer, depending on what happens with Silva's new contract, Iraola's new contract. Glasner obviously is leaving Crystal Palace. We've had that publicly confirmed already. And Kieran McKenna, let's not forget, was also part of the first process as well. But my sense with McKenna is if Manchester United go down the route of this so-called United DNA with a younger coach, then as long as Carrick continues performing as is, there would be no reason to necessarily try and bring McKenna back over than offering Carrick the role. So although the West Ham draw was somewhat disappointing, Carrick's form at the moment warrants him being part of the conversation, and that hasn't gone unnoticed at Manchester United.
I think the line that keeps being reiterated is best in class, and I think Man United fans would just question what best in class looks like, because I mean you've named there multiple different types of managers, some who have a great CV, some who are sort of building that and would grow with the club. So it would be interesting to see what direction they take, because there's multiple different directions there. One that you didn't name was Carlo Ancelotti, yet I've seen him linked to Manchester United a fair bit with it over the last 48 hours. I mean, for me personally, again, I think it's a manager who, at this point in his career, would he want to take on the Manchester United job? Is it the right fit as of now? Amazing CV, one of the best managers that I've seen in my lifetime, but is it the right fit at this point in his career? Is he one that is truly on the radar?
I haven't heard Carlo Ancelotti, to be perfectly honest with you, and my understanding is that Ancelotti, having taken the Brazil national team job for this forthcoming World Cup, very recently agreed a contract renewal to stay with the Brazilian Football Confederation through until the 2030 World Cup, which is the centenary edition. So at this stage, Ancelotti is not expected to be one of the managers available in the market in the summer, much like Thomas Tuchel. Again, I come back to what I said before. International management can throw up surprises because you're basically booked tournament to tournament every 2 years. And if things are going well in the qualification for one of those tournaments, but then you massively underperform, suddenly you can get a big wave of public pressure or internal pressure to change manager. So contracts don't always mean as much in international football, because ultimately you're judged tournament by tournament. And as a consequence, let's wait and see with Carlo Ancelotti exactly what happens after this World Cup. But as it stands, Brazil are happy with him. Ancelotti wants to stay. And I still think if Ancelotti takes another club gig, it will be in Saudi Arabia, because they've been pushing for Carlo Ancelotti for over 2 years. But yeah, all quiet on the Ancelotti front. With Xavi Hernandez, he would be keen on the Manchester United role. We don't yet know whether it's reciprocal. So those close to Xavi Hernandez make it clear that if Man United offered him the job, he would want to take it. But I'm not aware at this stage of any approach from Manchester United to Xavi Hernandez. So we have to be a little bit patient with this one, because Manchester United, when they say thorough process, to try and explain it a little bit. Phase one, like I say, is what names are we going to put forwards? And usually in a process, there will be a dozen. Then those names are given to a data department and things are run in terms of, is the manager the right cultural and stylistic fit? Has he got a proven track record of getting the best out of players? They look maybe if there's any pre-existing relationships. They basically look at the CV, but they put it through a data-led filter. And that tends to reduce 12 to maybe 6 or 7. And then that's when more senior figures outside of the data department take those sort of dossiers and start looking more at face-to-face interactions and discussions and debates that don't only factor in the data, and ultimately look at gut instinct and science and testimonials. Maybe there's players in the Man United squad that have worked with some of the candidates. And often clubs these days, to my understanding, certainly Liverpool and Chelsea, when they've run managerial processes, before they go to the manager, which a lot of fans are just expecting, and they're like, why haven't you held a talk or an interview? They do things backwards compared to a traditional HR interview, if you like, where you'd interview, and then if they like you, you'd have a second phase, and then if they like you, they take the references. The references, speaking to players or coaches that have worked with the manager, tend to come first. So they've got a massive amount of data. And then finally, that number goes down from 6 to maybe 4. And that's when the informal or formal outreach starts. And if you know you're not going to have that manager in place until the summer, and you start this process as Manchester United in early February, you can almost do phase 1 3 weeks and then take another 3 weeks for each of the phases, which is why I'm not so sure that will be any earlier than mid-March before we start to learn why and who is on the smaller shortlist, which is more likely to be 4 names rather than somewhere closer to a dozen.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting stuff there and some good insight. And just before we move on from the manager candidates, I just wanted to touch on Nagelsmann a little bit. Do you think that his established connection with Christopher Vivell will hold any weight in this? Because Vivell has been very much involved with part of the recruitment for Manchester United. He's a key figure at Manchester United. They previously worked together at RB Leipzig. Do you think that will carry any weight?
I think that Christopher Vivell, like I said in my last answer, would be used as somebody that could give testimonial on Julian Nagelsmann, but I'm not aware that he is the one significantly running this process. I'm told that the decision will rest in hiring, if we're obviously talking about lower than the board because various formal approvals are needed, still with Omar Barada playing a key role, and obviously Jason Wilcox as well. And I would add that Jim Ratcliffe wants to get significantly involved in this process. So we were led to believe when Ratcliffe took over at Manchester United and had sporting control that he would delegate to others on a day-to-day basis because he has a lot of other interests. But actually, I think with this process, he's likely to get his hands dirty. So Nagelsmann, I'm told, has not specifically been put forwards by Christopher Vivell, but yet is a name that he would endorse to be part of this process. And the reason why I brought up the references and how they perversely come first, not after, is because before somebody like Nagelsmann is reached out to, Manchester United will want to understand from a variety of sources effectively what happened at Bayern Munich in particular. And I know that when Nagelsmann was on the Chelsea shortlist, there were 2 issues why he didn't advance. The first was that when they asked about his kind of conduct, and I appreciate there's 2 sides to every story, so this is just Chelsea's perspective, but when they asked about his conduct and how he managed the dressing room and what the players thought of him on a personal level, on a tactical level, on a managerial level, they didn't get great references, and they thought that he might be a risk in terms of fit. Doesn't mean that much. Chelsea moved on. They got other managers. Those managers didn't work. And now, of course, 2 or 3 further down the line since they interviewed Nagelsmann, they've got Liam Rosenior. So just because Chelsea didn't like what they heard doesn't mean that Man United won't like what they hear. But it's worth making that point because Christopher Vivell was, of course, briefly also at Chelsea Football Club. And then the second thing about Julian Nagelsmann, and this is where Chelsea's perspective is different from those close to Nagelsmann. So Chelsea argue that Nagelsmann said, I don't want to be part of a process. I don't want anything thorough. I don't want to wait. I don't want to be interviewed 5 times. I just want you to either offer me the job or not, because my CV, my talent speaks for itself. So Nagelsmann was not prepared to wait and entertain a competitive, thorough process, at least when Chelsea came calling. And right now, he's entirely focused on Germany and the World Cup. So that's another consideration to bear in mind, that if Man United want Nagelsmann, if he treats the process the same as he did when Chelsea came calling, he's likely to say, don't waste my time with several interviews whilst I'm preparing for a World Cup. I've been at Germany, I've been at Bayern, I've been at Leipzig. I'm one of the brightest young coaches in the world. You know my style. Much of what's out there is public. You don't need all of this data and this meticulous process. If you want me, come and get me. But if not, then don't put me through a competitive, thorough process whilst I'm preparing for the 2026 World Cup. So we'll see if he's learned from that process. And actually, if he says, if you want me, I'll do what it takes to be part of this process. But certainly when Chelsea tried for Nagelsmann, they were surprised that the response was basically, if you want me, offer me the job. Don't put me through all of these hoops to try and get the job. And let's see whether, should Manchester United make an approach, they're given the same court answer, or whether actually Nagelsmann would be prepared to go head-to-head with several other candidates in what might be quite a long-winded and thorough process from Manchester United's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting insight. Manchester United slightly different to Chelsea, I think, but Chelsea's still, a big club that carries a lot of weight. But yeah, really interesting to sort of hear that side of things from Julian Nagelsmann. I mean, also to hear that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is getting his hands dirty within this recruitment process because he's got so much experience hiring managers at elite level. Well done, Sir Jim. Hopefully he makes the right decision if he gets involved and decides the manager. But lastly, because I do want to move on to other players, do you think Michael Carrick has a genuine shout at getting this job full time? I mean, I know a lot can happen between now until the end of the season, but do you think he would genuinely be considered? And there's quite a significant possibility that he could get the full-time job.
Yeah, I've said it many times that when he got the job, he was not told that you're one of the long-term candidates, but he was obviously told you're not interim, you are the head coach. And because of that, if he does well, there's means for Manchester United to say you are the head coach, not the interim. We're going to extend your time as the head coach and back you with the summer when Manchester United are expected to have a really busy and ambitious market activity, regardless of whether they do or don't get Champions League football, but of course more so financially speaking if they do. Carrick, like I've said on previous shows, doesn't have much to work with in terms of really wowing everyone on all four fronts because Manchester United are not in European competition. So he's done about everything he can in the sense of winning a Manchester derby, an excellent victory away at Arsenal, 4 wins on the bounce, unbeaten in his first 5 games. But the sort of acid test for Carrick comes between mid-February and likely mid-April, whilst Manchester United are concurrently interviewing other candidates. And if in that period he continues an unbeaten run or a string of victories, then yes, I'm told he will form part of the process as well and does stand a chance of getting the job. But ultimately, Manchester United's aim is Champions League football. It was under Ruben Amorim. It is under Michael Carrick. I remember coming on the show towards the beginning of the season and after Amorim was sacked and saying twice that Manchester United's hierarchy believe this squad is good enough for a top 4 or a top 5 finish. I said it before a ball was kicked. I said it over the festive period. And I said it when Ruben Amorim was sacked. And on each occasion, a lot of people, and fair, because everyone's got an opinion, replied and said, how can you say that when you've got Arsenal and Man City and Chelsea and Liverpool and Villa flying and Man United are nowhere near that? And actually, when we first said it, Tottenham had made a blistering start to the season too. But now they're 4th. And the sort of irony of the Amorim departure is that he didn't statistically and in terms of points tally leave Manchester United in a dreadful position. It's not like Thomas Frank, who has departed with Tottenham 16th in the table. I think, and maybe the chat can correct me, Man United were either 6th or 7th when Ruben Amorim was sacked. And this is why those back-to-back wins against Man City and Arsenal propelled Manchester United right into a Champions League spot. So it's a tight table, but if you look at it, 5th is likely to be good enough because a lot of the English teams have gone through to the knockout stage of European competition. If we're going with 5th, then at the moment that's Chelsea on 44 points and Man United are on 45, and there's starting to be a gap opening up. Liverpool, I think, 42, Brentford 39, Everton 37. So at this point of the season, you're thinking it would be pretty disastrous if Manchester United, with 12 games to go, were caught by Everton or Brentford. So it feels like bad season is 6th and good season is 5th, 4th, 3rd or 2nd. And the reality is that that doesn't make a great deal of difference, really, because Champions League is Champions League. So Carrick qualifying for the Champions League will carry weight. But if he's to get this job, it's not just about doing that, because a lot of people at the club think that Ruben Amorim was not far off that either. It's about the system. It's about the culture. It's about the unity of players. It's about the consistency. And most importantly, it's about the manner of winning. So if Michael Carrick's to get this job, and it's possible but not definite, then he not only has to qualify for Champions League, which is the base aim for the season, but he has to do that with a bit of swagger and style and consistency. And if he does that, then absolutely he could be a candidate also to get this job permanently.
Well, let's wait and see, and hopefully I was going to say Goodison Park then. Nearly said it. Hopefully.
Hill Dickinson Stadium doesn't really have the same ring to it, does it?
Doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, we'll test out the stadium. We'll test out, see if the atmosphere is flying, see if it's a tough place to go. Yeah, I'm excited for that game, and we'll see if we can bounce back. I mean, a lot of people had different opinions on that West Ham game. I mean, my personal perspective is that I think if you talked about 13 points out of 15 points when Carrick first came in, a lot of Man United fans would be very happy. West Ham had won 3 in 4 games. They're fighting for their lives. They had an excellent defensive display. We've not got a great track record in the London Stadium. Yes, I would have liked to win the game, and yes, my standards for Manchester United is going beating West Ham at their ground. But with all factors considered, it's a very different setup to the other games that we've played. And the fact we're still on an unbeaten run, I'm quite happy with. It's just, let's see how we move on and play against Everton at the Hill Dickinson Stadium.
And yeah, dare I say as well that the game somehow is viewed through the ridiculous prism of one guy getting a haircut. And because 5 wins in a row didn't happen, a lot of people are like, ugh, bit of an anticlimax, bit of a letdown. I can promise you, Manchester United couldn't care less whether or not he gets a haircut. Manchester United would happily take 4 wins in a row for eternity and 1 draw, and then another 4 wins in a row and 1 draw, because it would mean that they would win absolutely everything on the planet. And as you say, the game wasn't terrible. West Ham's a difficult place to go, and Michael Carrick is unbeaten with 4 wins and 1 draw. And if he replicates that between now and the end of the season, I would wager that Manchester United would finish second.
Well said, Ben. Well said. Moving on, I want to talk about Bruno Fernandes and his future. I know we've spoken about this quite a lot and we'll probably continue to do so, but I think it's a very significant player for Manchester United as the captain of the club. And my question is, I mean, previous reports, and we've spoken about on the show, about Bruno Fernandes potentially waiting until after the World Cup to make his decision on his Manchester United future. I mean, my question is, can Manchester United afford to wait that long? He's the captain of the club. There's arguments that, 2 players will need to replace a player of that significance. It's huge in terms of, what's going to happen next season. He's a big part of the football club. And can Man United afford to let Bruno wait until after the World Cup to make his decision? Or do you think they'll try and convince him beforehand? And can they convince him beforehand?
Yeah, I think they can afford to wait. My understanding is the contract expires June 2027, but there's also, to my knowledge, a club option to extend for a year. So contractually speaking, if Man United do nothing and want to keep Bruno Fernandes, they can. The first priority has almost been to clear the air after that last Bruno Fernandes interview, because he obviously said that he felt the club wanted him out. And when the captain of the football club thinks the club want to sell him to Saudi Arabia, whether rightly or wrongly, you have to have a conversation about that. But I'm not aware at this stage that Manchester United are starting conversations with Bruno Fernandes regarding stay or go, because if they take 0 action, someone's got to come and get Bruno Fernandes, and Manchester United can either turn that down, or the interested party would have to trigger his 60 million euros release clause. It's difficult as well, because if you're talking to Bruno Fernandes now, you can't tell him who the new manager is going to be. You can't tell him if Man United have got Champions League football next season. You don't want to distract him as we get really close to the World Cup with talks about his future. So my expectation is that Bruno Fernandes, stay or go, will control the timeline, because Manchester United feel they don't have to, because as I said before, he's still contracted until 2027 and there's a 1-year option as well. And that's why Manchester United are quite calm about the situation. But as I've said many, many times, and regardless of what Bruno says he wants before, during or after the World Cup, and I'm sure, by the way, he'll be asked about it at the World Cup as well, Saudi deal makers, new deal, no new deal, release clause, no release clause, because remember, the release clause is time specific as well, so it's not valid for the entire summer. Saudi deal makers want to try for Bruno Fernandes, and as a consequence, I would be surprised if after the World Cup, regardless of what happens, there isn't another push to try and get him to Saudi Arabia. Now, we know that when Al Hilal tried before the Club World Cup, Fernandes was really close to agreeing terms, but eventually decided it was wrong to move in a World Cup year. His full commitment was to Man United, and it wasn't the right move for his family. And the latter point is important, because if it wasn't the right move for his family then why would it necessarily be now? And yet you've got more than one Saudi club that still want to try for Bruno Fernandes and is prepared to trigger the release clause and take the entire scenario out of Manchester United's hands. One of those clubs is still Al Hilal. One is Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr, and Ronaldo's strike is seen by sources, even though he's expected to be back playing this weekend, as kind of a means to send a message to the central Saudi deal makers. You got to back Al Nassr, and they want more marquee names. So Bruno Fernandes and Al Nassr could also be one to watch. And then you've got Al Ittihad, who of the three Saudi clubs had always seen themselves as the favourites to get Bruno Fernandes. And now, even though they're clearly not like-for-like profiles, but N'Golo Kante's gone to Fenerbahce, Karim Benzema in a different position has gone to Al Hilal, Fabinho is expected to leave in the summer. So they're going to need one, if not two, big-name central midfielders. And it's all very well Ronaldo going, I want everything at Al Nassr. And it's all very well Al Hilal having a lot of money because they're one of the biggest clubs in Asia, let alone Saudi Arabia. But Al Ittihad in the last few seasons have won Saudi Pro League titles. And the optics at the moment for Al Ittihad are all about mass exodus. So the central deal makers who are looking, optically speaking, to raise the profile of the whole league, but not paint the club as moving backwards, especially not one that in recent seasons has won multiple titles. So they're quite keen to send stars to Jeddah, not Riyadh. Firstly, because of this big exodus at Al Ittihad. So I think they're going to get a lot of central funding, and Casemiro and Al Ittihad could also be one to watch. And then second of all, Al Ahly, because Al Hilal got Neymar, even though it didn't really work out. Al Nassr got Cristiano Ronaldo. Al Ittihad got Karim Benzema. And Al Ahly have got some phenomenal players that I would consider on or around that level, such as Riyad Mahrez, Leicester legend, my team. And let's not forget Ivan Toney's playing there. But the feeling within Al Ahly is that they've not got that real A-list X-factor marquee name. So I think you're going to see a lot of these names in the market: Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, Vini Jr. if he goes, Ousmane Dembele, according to reports, and many other Premier League players. I think you're going to get money and ambition coming for these names from Jeddah in particular, because the central deal makers really want to strengthen those two Jeddah sides. And that partially is why I think Ronaldo's revolted, because he's sensed after January, maybe the money might run out a little bit as far as central funds are concerned for Al Nassr. So Saudi and Bruno Fernandes is one to watch. And I think it's important that people understand that wider Saudi point, that 2023 was this big push. Many people think the project's gone quiet or backwards since then. But remember two things. One, it's a World Cup year. After the World Cup, different story for how a lot of players think. And the second thing in all of this is that there's the foreign quota, meaning once you've filled it, you can't keep adding and adding and adding. Even Al Hilal with Benzema in a really difficult position now because they can't register Darwin Nunez for Saudi Pro League games. So that stops you signing window on window on window, which means these waves of Saudi money and ambition tend to be in 3-year cycles. 2023, 3-year contract to Kante, 3-year contract to Benzema. 2026, at the end of it, they will extend the odd name or move them on within Saudi as they did with Benzema. But generally speaking, of the 100-odd foreigners that arrived in 2023, 40 or 50% of them could leave, opening the door for mass spending and mass recruitment again in Saudi Arabia. And to those deal makers and clubs, there will be multiple Manchester United players that they're interested in.
Well, let's wait and see. I think that's definitely something to watch for the summer, and the explanation behind that does make sense, especially when you're talking about the players' mindset after a World Cup year is done and the World Cup is over with. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how the summer plays out. I mean, speaking more on the summer, Ben, I wanted to talk a little bit about a left back. And I know we've spoken about this on numerous shows about whether Manchester United will go for a left back, and you've said that was Ruben Amorim's preference. I mean, do you think Manchester United will go for a left back in the summer, or do you think it could end up being one of them positions like with the midfield last summer, where you want a left back, but it might have to wait because we also need midfielders? There's also talk of a left winger. Do you think Man United will be in the market for a left back in the summer?
Yeah, again, it's so difficult to answer that because Ruben Amorim wanted a left back. Ruben Amorim pushed for Pervis Estupiñán. He went to Milan. We reported that on the show over the summer. Ruben Amorim felt that there was more strength needed on that side. Carrick, until he knows if he does or doesn't have the job in the long run, won't necessarily have a particularly firm or valued opinion. And if the system changes, we'll have to understand if someone on the right side or someone that can play both sides is of interest. So there's not really that many concrete left or right sided targets yet. They've been focusing on the central midfield. They're very aware of the Zerbi situation, and that might require another forward to come in. Left winger over left back seems to be the focus at this stage, which is where, for example, the Iliman Ndiaye and others links come from. But I come back to what I said before, that a forgotten point in all of this is Giovanni Quenda. And when Manchester United were really going big on Quenda, the whole point was he was going to come immediately and be a left wing back, even though Chelsea succeeded in signing him, keeping him at Sporting until this summer, and Chelsea view Quenda as a left winger. So in summer, there was much more of a push towards specifically left back or left wing back. Now I think the jury is out, because as I think I also said on a previous show, if Harry Maguire extends, they might go left winger like Semenya. I know he can play on the right as well, but left winger that can play left back. If Harry Maguire goes, they might go left-sided centre-back that can double up as left back and then prioritise the pathway of Diego Leon, who's impressing a lot of people at the football club currently. And then on the right-hand side, they have to think about the long-term future and whether they need a younger fullback there as well. So these are internal discussions, but there's no real clarity yet. I know over the summer, there were a few names that they really liked. Alejandro Grimaldo was one of them, but no approach was made. And I don't think many people really thought that Manchester United were going to go too big there. On the right-hand side, we've heard links before with Marcus Llorente, who was a player that was actually put forwards, believe it or not, by Dan Ashworth, even though people bill him as only sort of pitching safe Premier League bets, and Daniel Munoz, another one that I think we've mentioned on the show before. But at this stage, there's nothing advanced. There's been no formal outreach. It's still an internal conversation. And it might be quite hard to answer that, are they going to sign a left back or a left wing back, until we know the new manager and what system he's going to play and what input he's going to give into the conversation, because the noise around the left wing back was Amorim driven. And when he didn't get one along with a midfielder, that was obviously a point of contention, specifically with Jason Wilcox.
Like I've said multiple times, INEOS have got a lot to do in the summer regarding manager signings. And even when you talk about, convincing Bruno Fernandes or even telling Bruno Fernandes what is going to be the future of Manchester United, you talk about, not being able to tell him if they've got Champions League football yet or about a manager yet. I mean, you're trying to convince players to sign for you. That's also a big part of the project, which delays being able to have them conversations. I mean, just quickly, when you spoke about a left winger there, I'm only asking you because I keep seeing his name come up, so I just wanted to see if there was any more clarification on it. And I saw a report earlier today that Manchester United are looking at Ndiaye to be a Marcus Rashford replacement in the summer. So I just wanted to get a quick update. Is Marcus Rashford expected to sign for Barcelona? And is Ndiaye really a target for us?
Yeah, Ndiaye is somebody that we're hearing a lot of links with, and I'm not aware of any Manchester United approach at this stage. The other thing about that type of player is that he likes versatility. So you can't really classify him, in my opinion anyway, as a left winger, because if you look at where he plays, he spends much more time on the right or through the centre, but can play on the left as well. And if you're thinking about the right-hand side, Manchester United are relatively well covered. And if you're thinking about coming back to the Bruno Fernandes question, is he going to be happy at Manchester United and want to stay? Well, likely playing in that more advanced role through the centre, which means Mbeumo might have to go right or play as a number 9. And we've definitely seen Carrick take that kind of tactic. And it's sort of one conundrum, even if it's a very healthy one, triggers another and another and another. So you start at the back and you go, Ruben Amorim wanted a more experienced goalkeeper such as Emi Martinez, but Sene Lammens was signed, and that looks like a really shrewd bit of business, but it caused a bit of contention and debate and was one factor that led to the beginning of the end. Then you go further forwards and you go, Harry Maguire, is he staying or going? And does that impact whether they go centre-back, left-back, as opposed to left wing-back, or left winger. Then you go into midfield and you go, the Kobbie Mainoo situation has been resolved. Brilliant. But it means he's playing. Brilliant. And that means that at the moment it's Mainoo, Casemiro. So then, of course, Bruno Fernandes is going to be further forwards. Brilliant. But then you have to go, well, Mbumo's back from AFCON. Where does he play? Wasn't the whole point of signing 2 10s for Ruben Amorim, forcing Bruno Fernandes to go deeper? How do you keep those 2 10s happy? If Mbumo's leading the line, Cunha's actually going to be the one playing on the left. If Cunha's leading the line, then Mbumo's likely to filter out to the right-hand side, and then it would make zero sense to try and bring in a player like Iliman Ndiaye. So at the moment, not really a topic I'm hearing a lot about. He's under a contract until June 2029, and I think this will play out. It's just a personal opinion at this stage, but having asked around to Everton sources, my view is that this could play out very similar to Jared Branthwaite, where anyone going for Ndiaye, Manchester United or other, may push and push and push and push. And actually, Everton's ambitious owners may do exactly what they did with Jared Branthwaite and refuse all offers for Iliman Ndiaye over the summer.
Interesting stuff. Well, for everybody asking about Ndiaye, you've got your answer there. And just to wrap things up, Ben, before I read out a few super chats, Carlos Baleba. I'm a little bit confused about Carlos Baleba because this season his form has been inconsistent. As he's playing right now, I don't really see him as a clear upgrade on what we have. And yet, Manchester United still seem to be very keen on him. I mean, why are Manchester United super keen on him despite his poor form this season? And do you think he still is a priority?
Yeah, I think Carlos Baleba's on the list. Elliot Anderson is one of the leading targets. It's true to my knowledge that Sandro Tonali has also entered the equation as far as Manchester United's thinking is concerned. And many in the industry feel that Carlos Baleba had his head turned by Manchester United. And in addition to that, his poor form is down to an unsettling period when Manchester United were genuinely trying over the summer, coupled with injury and the fact that Brighton at the moment seem to have hit a little bit of a rut and they're down to 14th in the Premier League. So it's not just Baleba that's not necessarily performing at his best. I think Karim Matoma has been off so far. I also haven't seen enough yet out of Gomez or Veltman on the right for Brighton. And Baleba at his best was not only about ball winning, it was about momentum and chemistry and fluidity that's not there across the whole of the Brighton team at the moment. And for whatever reason, under Fabian Hertzler, they're not as fluid, they're not as entertaining, and they're not as free in terms of goal scoring. And that makes the job of a central midfielder very different and difficult because they haven't just sort of got carte blanche to really attack spaces and win the ball back. And if they do, they're looking up and they're not seeing the same level of gung-ho or ambition that sort of free-flowing Brighton have often accustomed us to. And that's why I think they've conceded over 30 goals and they've only scored just over 30 goals. So you're basically not scoring enough and letting in too many. And I'm sure, I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but were you to compare that to last season, I would imagine that Brighton was still also conceding a truckload of goals, but I bet you they were scoring close to 70. And this season, they're only on course to maybe get about 45. And that may sound like an odd thing to say when you're talking about a central midfielder because he's not the goal scorer. But if you look closely at Baleba at his best, often 2-3 phases before Brighton went on a gallivanting run or scored an important goal, he's winning something or he's putting pressure on somebody or he's forcing a mistake or he's attacking the space. And I think the general lack of confidence in the team has also affected his performance as well. And Manchester United look at this and they think he's young. There's still a player there with a high ceiling. And now maybe you can get Baleba cheaper than some of the numbers, potentially, not definitely, because Brighton don't name numbers. But maybe the price comes down and that actually makes the player more marketable. Because if you're going to go for Elliot Anderson, if Forest go down, let's see what the price is. If Brighton are struggling and Baleba's unhappy, let's see what the price is. Can you get both of those midfielders for significantly cheaper than you thought they might be available for had you made bids for them and gone for them over the summer? So Baleba, weirdly, even though it seems counterintuitive, could become more of a market opportunity because if he continues to have this underwhelming season, potentially the price could drop.
Yeah, I get that. My only concern would be is if the noise around a Manchester United move is going to affect your form, how is the noise when you're a Manchester United player going to affect your form? Because you're going to have so much noise around you when you are a Manchester United player. But let's see how that one plays out. And then just to finish, because you did mention him, Sandro Tonali. I don't know if we've spoken about this yet on the show. He's definitely a new emerging target for Manchester United. Do you think he's truly gettable?
I think the player is exploring options, even though he signed a new deal kind of discreetly during his gambling ban. And the issue compared to Alexander Isak in terms of getting the player out of Newcastle is, I'm told Tonali is much more appreciative of Newcastle United and everything they did when he was suspended for those breaches of the gambling rules. So I would be surprised, might be famous last words, because we probably thought this about Isak 6 months ago, but I would be surprised if Sandro Tonali does an Alexander Isak and actively forces his way out of the football club in the summer by ostracizing himself. But I think at Newcastle's end, they are also open, especially if they don't get Champions League football next season, to selling Tonali at the right price, which many in the industry think will start with an 8 and may well even end up being over 100 million. So Manchester United are interested, Manchester City are interested, and Arsenal are interested. Those are the 3 Premier League clubs. But don't discount Juventus, because sources I speak to say the player would welcome a move abroad. And as a consequence, it may be that from Tonali's point of view, he wants to stick black and white and go from Newcastle to Juventus rather than stay within the Premier League. So Man United might be there, but I think it will depend on a few factors. The first being if Newcastle get Champions League football, and the second being just how high the football club value Tonali at. Because if Man United want to drop 100+ million on a midfielder, then I still think that will be Elliot Anderson, not Sandro Tonali. If the price is under 100 million, then there could be seen as more value in the deal, and we'll have to wait and see whether Manchester United enter that race. But I'd be surprised asking around if Manchester United agree with 100 million plus valuation for Sandro Tonali. But then I don't think Juventus are going that high either. So it's sort of fascinating, because remember Tyler Dibbling, Manchester United linked, ended up going to Everton. Southampton said he was 100 million. Newcastle United, 3 months before Isak left, said that there was no price on Isak. And then they said he was 150 million and he went for 125 million. Brighton wanted in the January window before Moises Caicedo left 120 million plus for Moises Caicedo. They sold him in the summer for about 115 million, but still lower. So I'm always a little bit reticent so early from a summer window to start putting numbers, because usually if you hear a public number at this stage, it's club driven and it's often intended to ward off the market or set out their stall. And I'm sure if you go back and look at all the published numbers in a January or February ahead of a summer transfer, the vast majority of those players don't go for that number. So in theory, Newcastle might want 100+ million, but let's see what the final price is. And if it's under 100 million and Tonali chooses to stay in the Premier League, then yes, Manchester United could be there. But so I expect will be Man City and also Arsenal.
Do Man City want to go and get their own targets? They're around everything that we're trying to do. Look, Ben, I appreciate all the updates. Absolutely fantastic insight as per usual. We've got Daniel Thompson in the chat saying, hope you well, Beth and Ben and the United stand. I honestly don't think there's a way back for Sir Jim. Not just the comments, but the damage he's done his whole tenure. I think his position is untenable and he needs to go. So Daniel voicing some strong opinions there. Lewis March says, my top 5 is Enrique, Xavi, Poch, De Zerbi or Carrick. Keel says, why are we not going for Ancelotti or Enrique? I mean, this is and Lauren Baxter says, Ben, do you think we will get any good players? I mean, here's hoping to that, Lauren. I think
we will. I mean, I think you will, I should say.
We will, Ben, yeah.
I mean, I'm a Leicester fan through and through, although a soft spot for Man U, because you may remember the draw that we had at Old Trafford, where afterwards the Leicester fans stayed and let off blue flares. And that was just before the Spurs game when Chelsea and Spurs drew. So we were kind of celebrating the title at Old Trafford and I was there. So a bit of a soft spot for Manchester United because of that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big summer for you And, I'll only reiterate what I've said before, that because it's all about net spend and things like Champions League football, there's not this like big fixed specific number, but there will be a number 6. There will be more of an engine room midfielder. There will likely be a left winger. There will possibly be a full back, and there will maybe be a number 9 as well. So it is going to be an important and, I think, high spending summer for Manchester United. And the good news for Man United, I think, again, just a personal opinion, is if they can enter a market of turmoil after a poor season under Ruben Amorim, and in the summer still get Mbeumo when there was plenty of other interest, and Cunha, and in addition to that, win a race for Benjamin Sesko when Newcastle were really aggressive. Some of it isn't always about does the player work or not work or succeed or fail. Sometimes you just have to know that if you're that kind of club, you can win a race. And I think if Manchester United have confidence that they won more than they lost, even though you can paint it as where they didn't get Semenya and others, but generally they're winning more transfer battles than they're losing. Whereas over that same summer, Newcastle lost more than they won. Tottenham lost more than they won. Whereas I think Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea won more than they lost. And that is a metric that tells you, regardless of where your club is, if your brand is strong and your wage structure is strong and your fan base is good, players always want to come. So if Man United get Champions League football and things improve on the football field, they will no doubt think within the club that they're even stronger in the market to go out and get some of these targets, which is why I do think they will have a productive summer ahead, especially if they can get clarity on the new manager early in that summer or before, and especially if Carrick can get Champions League football.
Brilliant stuff. I'm excited for the summer, Ben. You can't be excited for the summer there, so hopefully, I'm sure we'll speak throughout the summer and obviously before then as well. And I think for you, it's going to be a huge one. You know, the World Cup, the manager appointment, all of the transfer stories. So you better be getting your rest in now and get ready.
Don't worry, I'll bring my A game. If it's Poch to Man U or a Premier League club, I'll be following America as well. So I'll be with him all summer and I'll see what I can find out.
Well, he's been talking about the Premier League, hasn't he? So let's see. Look, Ben, thank you so much for coming on and joining us and giving us some insight, some very well-needed insight into Manchester United. And thank you to everybody in the comments for getting their opinions in as well. The super chats, smash a like on the video for Ben as well before you leave. Have a lovely Thursday, everyone, and we will see you on the next one.